Okay, let's begin. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to CryptoPH Conversations Bitcoin Halving Edition. Live from the Gcash office. We are also streaming live. Wow, points at camera at the BitPinas Facebook page. And hello sa mga nanonood online and also to everyone here at the Gcash office. I'm Gian, your host for tonight, and we are thrilled to have you join us for a deep dive into the future of Bitcoin here in the Philippines. But before we start, we would like to thank our partners. So this event is brought to you by BitPinas and Luis Buenaventura and co-organized by Bitshares Labs. And we would also like to thank our venue partner, G Crypto. And as you can see dito sa screen, we have a contest and we're giving away 25,000 Satoshis. Chill. Satoshis ang pinag-uusapan. Okay. So if you're here in the audience, we want you to tweet with the hashtag CryptoPH and tag at BitPinas on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, kahit saan. But more importantly sa Twitter, spread the word about the event. And then you can also scan this QR code that you can see here on the screen so that you can receive your POAP from Mintu. And then, online, meron din kaming giveaway para sa inyo. Kasi kayo talagang nagpo-point ako dun sa camera, parang naman mag-hi sila sa akin. And yeah, for everyone online, you can share the live stream on Facebook, but your post must be on public. So share your thoughts on the whole live stream, kung meron kayong quotable quotes that you want to share or na pick up, share the live stream and make sure that your post is in public so that we can see it. Part din kayo ng pwedeng manalo ng 25,000 Satoshis. And yeah, that's about it. Let's kick things off with an opening remark from Michael, the editor-in-chief here at BitPinas. Palakpakan.
Ayun, thank you so much, Gian, for being here at hosting this BitPinas CryptoPH Conversations. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our flagship meetup, CryptoPH Conversations, here at the Gcash office. So my name is Michael. I am the editor-in-chief of BitPinas, and it's my pleasure to host you here, guys, tonight sa ating conversations na event. I would also like to thank the leadership at Gcash for letting us host the meetup here. So we have closely independently monitored yung Gcash involvement in crypto since 2020. So I'm happy that they are allowing these kinds of events to happen at their venue. So yun. So I just want to thank Luis, who has lent his support to BitPinas, his support and credibility for sa BitPinas from time to time and again since 2017. So thank you so much. So as we gather here and delve into the topic of crypto or of the Bitcoin halving, which is a pivotal event in the crypto calendar, it's essential that we reflect on how far Bitcoin has come or crypto has come, especially here in the Philippines. No? So Bitcoin is no longer just a digital asset. It's a revolutionary idea that challenges the traditional views that we have on money. So at BitPinas, we have been closely following Bitcoin's history here in the country since 2017. So now we can buy Bitcoin whenever we want, wherever we want, no, with our apps on our phones, unlike before. So when we started in BitPinas in 2017, mahirap pang bumili ng Bitcoin. And what we have are parang lagi pa nagka-crash at that time, no? So, ayun. So, tonight we have an incredible lineup of speakers. Well, dalawa sila. So including the head of Gcash, or the head of crypto at Gcash, Luis Buenaventura, the Philippines' foremost crypto thought leader, who also founded one of the first crypto exchanges here in the Philippines. And our special guest, Dean Florin Hilby, author of the new book about Bitcoin, Dean of College of Law at Silliman University, and former Solicitor General of the Philippines. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dean Hilbay for fighting for our territory. So thank you so much for that. So I just want to put that up. No? So ayun, so together we'll explore the future of Bitcoin. And the format of Crypto PH Conversations is that once someone asks a question, that person will pick the next person who will ask the question to the speakers. And Dean Hilby and Luis will answer, or sino man sa kanila will answer your question. So, ano ba yung pwede nating tanong sa kanila? For example, the impact of Bitcoin halving, or can Bitcoin become the Philippines reserve currency? Or are we all getting rich this year, 'di ba? So, yun. So CryptoPH is those kinds of conversations. So it's about our community and it's about each of us, and hope that one by one, all of us together, we can influence the direction of Bitcoin, of crypto here in the country. So maraming salamat, magandang gabi, and let's enjoy the night. Thank you.
Very well said. Wow. Charot. Thank you, Michael, for setting the stage. Now let's hear from Bitshares Labs, who helped in making this event possible. May pa-video tayo. Nakaka-hype yung video. Let's hear it up for Kyle Gatudan from BitShares Labs. Palakpakan!
Ayan. Hello, everyone. Thank you. So, I'd like to first extend our warmest regards to John Emmett Ingson, the CEO and founder of Bitshares Labs INC. Alongside him is Sir Henry James Banayat, the executive managing director of Bitshares Labs, whose expertise has guided our strategic direction and operational excellence. So, Bitshares Labs, or Blink, is a web developing company founded in 2019 on the forefront of spearheading Web3 communities in northern Luzon. We offer blockchain solutions and digital services to modernize transactions and businesses such as digital marketing, development, e-commerce, you can name it. So we are currently located in Baguio City. So if you're near Baguio or in Baguio, please come visit us. Or if you want to connect, you can visit our website, beacherslabs.com, or follow us through our social media platforms. We're in Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kyle. So kung mapadpad kayo sa Baguio, let's visit their office. Anyways, so this is the main event na. It's now time for a keynote by someone who not only shapes our views on crypto, but also drives the industry forward, especially dito sa Pilipinas. So please welcome the head of crypto here at GCash, Luis Buenaventura.
Hey everyone. Wow. Okay, so this is a pretty nice crowd. I've been doing this for a little bit of time now, no. This is going to be my third halving as of I guess we have about 8 more hours before the actual halving happens, but I've been doing this for about 10 years now, and I always have to remind myself that I have to approach this with like both humility and gratitude, no, because 10 years ago, we could not even imagine having an event like this in a big corporate office like Gcash. To be honest, Gcash itself wasn't even really this big yet 10 years ago, no? Like, honestly, the best we could get away with was little coffee shops in Makati, and the most that we would ever have as attendees would be maybe about 20 people, half of which would be friends and family that na medyo napilitan lang to show up, no, just so there would be people filling the seats. We've come a long way. And this presentation here is a little bit of a walkthrough of how far we've come. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about how this halving is going to be. It feels a little different from the last few, but also kind of talk about why it feels a little bit the same. This is obviously not the main event. The main event, I think, is our esteemed guest, Dean Hilby. Please get your questions ready for him. I'll pitch in a little bit later also. But this one is mostly here to set context and just get everyone on the same page when it comes to Bitcoin and the halving. Actually, I don't have a clicker, so I'm gonna keep doing this. It's okay. It's all right. Okay, so these are the three things we're going to cover today. Why do we even have a halving? Why does it happen every 4 years? And technically, it's not exactly correct to say that it happens every 4 years. It actually happens every 210,000 blocks. I'll explain what that means later on. And then finally, what actually happens, right? When the halving happens. Okay, so these are the three things we'll talk about. This is gonna take maybe about 10, 15 minutes. So you've got some, if you have questions, please save them for the end or for when we actually do our fireside chat after this whole keynote. Okay, so what was our first question? I've already forgotten. I guess it was why does the halving exist? Yeah. So as you probably know, Bitcoin is a chain of blocks. That's why it's called a blockchain. Each of those blocks are made of transactions, right? Now, the first transaction in every block is a reward transaction. And this reward is given to the miner that actually produces that block. We call that the Coinbase reward. And yes, if you're wondering, that is where the company Coinbase got its name from. So because this happens every 10 minutes, there is a miner somewhere in the world or a mining pool somewhere in the world who receives this Bitcoin reward. Okay? And this is actually Bitcoin's mechanism for issuing more Bitcoins into the world. Because if there was nothing like this, then actually where would the Bitcoin even come from? So this mechanism is kind of the excuse for creating more Bitcoin. And it also happens to be one of the most important mechanisms because that's where Bitcoin security comes from. It's all of these miners that are working together that are parang competing for this reward. That is what keeps the Bitcoin network secure. Now, the Bitcoin reward size gets smaller by design because theoretically, the Bitcoin price would go up in value the longer that it's around. At least that was the working theory when Satoshi designed this mechanism. So, syempre, if you believe that the price is going to keep going up, you don't keep giving the same amount every 10 minutes because then you'd be flooded with too much Bitcoin, right? So, what you want is for the price to go up and then the quantity of reward to go down over time. Now, sige, next slide, please. Thank you. Let's look at what the last three halvings have been like. No, so 2012 was the very first halving. So obviously Bitcoin started before then. No, but 2012 was the first time it halved. So it went from a 50 Bitcoin reward every 10 minutes down to 25. Okay, so try to imagine what that looks like. No, but I mean now it feels kind of crazy not to be rewarded 50 Bitcoins every 10 minutes because it's such a massive amount of money now. But back then it was $12, right? So $12 for 25 Bitcoins, it's fine. I mean, you could make a living from this, but it's not exactly the most amount of money in the world, no? Now, in 2016, we halved again, but look at what the price was then, no? So we went from $12 to $650 in the space of around 4 years or 210,000 blocks. Now, we went from 25 to 12.5. And then again in 2020, this was the most recent one. We went from 12.5 to 6.25. And by then we were in 4-digit range. Serious amounts of money now, right? So we went from $650 to 8,000. And then as of sometime tomorrow morning, I think the last estimate is like 7:30 a.m. So when we wake up tomorrow morning, hopefully we'll all be very hungover. No, it will be a new era for Bitcoin, right? It will be the fourth halving of many pa. There will still be many halvings. There will be halvings all the way until the year 2142. But for now, at least, this is the era that we're going to be in. No? And it will be 3.125 Bitcoins. And we are roughly, actually, mali na nga yung price, no? Because I did this yesterday. So I think we're at 65 now. Everyone looks at their CoinGecko at the same time. Yeah. So yeah, $65,000 is kind of where we're at right now. There's a little note here at the bottom. It says that this is fake because there's no such thing as whole Bitcoins. So if you look at the actual code base of Bitcoin, there is no such thing as a whole Bitcoin. It's always 100 million Satoshis. So when we say 3.125, we actually mean 300, 312 something something million bitcoins. That's a million satoshis. So that's actually what's going on there, no? So they just moved the decimal place because in the beginning the value was so little that that was the only way that you could wrap your head around it. But nowadays, because the value is so high, baliktad naman yung problem, no? Kasi now we have a hard time teaching people how to use Bitcoin because they say, oh, but I can only afford 0.00001 or whatever. Now it's the opposite problem. But back then, the reason why we didn't bother to do that was because well, the price was $12, right? So this is kind of how we've progressed over the years. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna drill down into each of these previous three halvings, and we're gonna like just compare and contrast the history of Bitcoin over the last 12 years. Next slide, please. Let's start with 2012. So obviously, I wasn't working in the industry back then. I'll tell you exactly where I was now. But so the first real Bitcoin halving happened here, November. I forget the exact date in November now. So this is November of 2012. The price was roughly $20 on that particular day. Okay. By the way, I'm not striving for accuracy with the prices here, Hub. I'm just kind of rounding it off so you can kind of get a sense of what the numbers were like. So yeah, it's a $20 Bitcoin back then. And boy, do I wish I knew what Bitcoin was back in 2012 because this was probably, I can't think of anything else that I would have rather have bought that 12 years ago. So it happened in November. And then what happened the day after the halving? Nothing really happened. No, it was just kind of flat. It was very flat for most of 2013. There was a small bump in the middle of the year. And then it only really started to go up in October. And it hit its all time high in November of the following year. So almost exactly 1 year after the halving, that's when it hit the cycle all time high. And that was $1,160. So between this and that, we're talking about a 50x growth, right? Now, almost immediately after that, we saw the big drop. And the people who have been around in the industry long enough will recognize this one. This was the Mount Gox collapse. So if you don't know what Mount Gox is, it was the Binance of that era. No? So this was the biggest exchange in the world. And honestly, when you say biggest exchange in the world back then, it was like, we're talking tiny, like hundreds of millions of dollars. Binance does that kind of volume in hours these days. But back then, that was a big deal. So there was a $300 million hack that caused the collapse of Mount Gox. And it triggered this downward slide that did not stop going down until $180. And that was in January of 2015. So here is, roughly here is when I first joined the industry. This is when I got my first job in crypto. I was the head of product for this company called Satoshi Citadel, which was one of the first wave of crypto companies here in the Philippines. I should say the first wave of Bitcoin companies here in the Philippines because there was no crypto industry back then. There was only Bitcoin. So anyway, so this is where I joined. And this first experience really shaped the way I think about crypto because my first year was at an all-time high, and then all I experienced that entire year was nothing but the price going down. Every month it was closing red, right? For the next, so from early 2014 to the end to early 2015, it was just red the entire time. And by the lowest point, it had lost whatever that is, 85%, right? Uh, and that really changed the way I thought about crypto, primarily because I joined crypto because I believed in the technology. I believed in the technology that Satoshi had come up with. I read the white paper many, many times, and I went down that whole rabbit hole, no? And I thought, wow, this might actually be a really interesting way to approach the money problem, no? That various governments and central banks have created for us. Now, what was weird was it became almost a religious experience for me this first year because it really shakes your faith when the thing that you are buying loses 85% of its value. And that's kind of how all of my thinking about crypto has been shaped through the years because ito yung first experience ko. Now, it's very interesting to watch new people who have just kind of started in the industry because I'm willing to bet that many of you also started during all-time highs because many of you probably started in 2021 or 2017 because that was when the crypto industry at the time was the hottest, right? So syempre, it's exciting. And then your next year will literally be like this, no? This kind of shape, no? And again, it really tests your faith. Now, ultimately, the thing that kind of kept me going was the fact that the technology itself never changed it. Throughout the time that I was suffering through this price drop, the technology was exactly the same thing that I believed in the first time I joined. In fact, it was improving pa nga eh. And every time the price goes up again, every time the price goes down after that, I remember that, actually none of the technology, the stuff that I believed in, that hasn't changed naman eh. It's only the market perception that has changed, right? So this is important. Okay, so try to, by the way, the reason why I hand drew these slides was because obviously if I showed you a candlestick graph, it's actually very hard to see kind of this shape. But I'll show you the reason why now in the next slide here. This is the 2016 halving. So the very first thing I'll say is it looks very similar, no? So here we go again. So 2015, very, very flat. And then July was when the halving hit. At the time, the price was $650. And then what happened the day after? Nothing. Nothing. It was just flat. Just flat. A little bit of a bump about early 2017. A little bit more of a bump in mid 2017. And then boom, December, $20,000. So how long are we talking about this time? It was about roughly 18 months, no? 18 months from here to there. And we're talking about a price gain of, I guess, about 20-ish percent. Sorry, 20x pala, 20x. Sorry, can we go back one slide and just like really quickly compare the, yeah, so you kind of see how the shape is very similar, no? Okay, go back to the 2016. Okay, so as luck would have it, there was another exchange collapse roughly after we hit the all-time high. This one you might probably not remember or be familiar with because CoinCheck is a Japanese exchange. But at the time, because the reason why this was so important was because 2017 and 2018, that was the year that the Asian market really kind of took over, no? And it wasn't just, it used to be just China. So 2015, 2016 was very China driven. And then the Japanese and South Korean market really started to get hot around this era. And the coin check collapse was really crazy because it shook the faith of all of the Japanese and South Korean investors. So the coin check collapse was around $500 million. Again, by today's standards, that's a little on the small side, but back then these were kind of big numbers. No? Okay, so what happened after that? Yeah, big slide. Big slide all the way down to January of 2019, and that's when we found our cycle low. So from $20,000, we dropped all the way to 3.8K. That is, what is that, a 75-ish percent drop. Okay? So very similar story between 2012 and 2016, right? You had a very high peak, multiples of 10 yung peak mo, and then the drop was 75 to 80%. Okay? Very similar. The only difference, I think, was this started in the middle of the year and that was the end of the next year. So parang 18 months ito, mas matagal, but the previous one was a year. It took about a year between the halving and the all-time high. Okay, so let's move forward in time now. So 2020, let's look at the shape. This one will be kind of weird. I'm not sure if you guys remember this, but we actually did a double peak this cycle. So, okay, again, market's kind of flat. Actually, I haven't been using the correct terminology pala, no, but like these flat areas, we call that crypto winter. And the reason for that is because it doesn't matter what you do. It feels like the market is just cold. Nothing works, no? Okay, so now we are at May of 2020. The price is $8,800. What happens the day after? Nothing. Same. Flat. No real action. But it starts to pick up as the year ends. No? And by the middle, so this is like summer Philippines, yeah, April, we hit our first 61K all-time high. And that was all-time high for a little bit. Um, and then after that, there was a big drop. Does anyone remember what was happening around this time in the global markets? So April 2021, so obviously we're in the middle of the pandemic now. April 2021 is when Dogecoin did 20,000% returns. So this was the era of Wall Street bets and kind of all the crazy Wall Street shenanigans. that that eventually parang they realized na parang actually it's all hype lang pala, and then the way that the market drew down afterwards was pretty violent. So we went from $61,000. I think this low was about 35. No, so we dropped about half, about 40%, in the space of a couple of months. So that was the story of 2021 until around October we started to climb again, and then we hit $69,000, which was our all-time high for the next couple of years. So what can we glean from at least this half? I'll talk about the next half later, no? Pero it, you can already see that although the 2020, the 12 and the 16 halvings look very, very similar, this is already a different shape. The timing is weird, there's double peaks. And then even the drawdown kind of didn't happen the same way, although there were collapses also. No, there was like the three arrows collapse, there was the Celsius collapse. Actually, it took like three big exchanges now to kind of really pull the market down. So it was 3C, Celsius, I guess Voyager, there was some other ones, and then the really big one was FTX, right? And that happened in November of 2022, and that triggered a price decline from 69 to 16. What is that? So about 70% also. So okay, what's going on? Why did the shape change? Why did the sequence of events kind of change? I think it's because the market knows that the halving is coming. I think it's because every time that we go through this, there are more and more market participants, meaning there's more money involved. And then there's also more people who know that this shit's about to happen. Right? So parang nagkakaroon na, like people are trying to front run what they know is inevitable, at least what they think in their minds is inevitable, that there's going to be a new all-time high. So they're trying to kind of get in early. And then getting in early causes this, right? This first peak, but it actually turns out that we couldn't really sustain it, so it drops. And then we try again because, well, we're supposed to have a new all-time high, right? So let's try again. So yun. So, and this is not like the market is talking to each other. This is just people. This is just behavior, no? And that it's not like there was some grand plan that really we're gonna end at 69,000. Like it's sobrang meme number, diba? But it happened anyway. It just happened naturally. So, okay, so that's where we were. And most of you were already around for this. And most of you were probably pretty shocked that, holy crap, this industry that I joined just lost 70% of its value over my first year, no? Guess what? Welcome to crypto. This is what everyone goes through, right? Okay, let's fast forward into where we are now, 2023 to 2024. Okay, so obviously I can't draw the rest of it yet, right? What's happened here? Well, the first thing is that our all-time high has already been broken, and I don't even get to do that whole. There's nothing here, no, yung the flat and then wala. We don't even get that. So now we know that there is not just a whole bunch of people who know how this stuff works, but they're front running enough na hindi na nga tayo umabot dun sa halving eh. We already broke the all-time high. And I think in my mind, this means that all bets are off. No? It makes it very, very hard to predict what's going to happen next. Although I will try. And the last slide here, I will try to do the rest of it. But okay, so that's where we were. 72 or $73,000 was kind of where we were. Uh, and then we're kind of now in April. It's $63,000. Um, the I wouldn't read too much into the April thing. Generally speaking, over the last 5 years or so, the middle to the end of April usually has a dump. And that's not just in crypto, that's in stocks and commodities and all of those areas. And the reason for that is because that's when the US tax deadline hits. No? So April 15th is the US tax deadline. That means everyone from the largest corporations to the poorest citizens, they all have to pay their taxes by then. Or they have to pull their money out. Basically, it's a no. It's a the liquidity is pulled out of the markets because they have to pay their taxes, and because of that, there's always a drawdown. And in some years, it's as small as 5%. In other years, it's as big as 10, 15%. So right now, it's about 15%. No, of course, that's not the only thing that's happened recently. We've also got some very bad news from Israel and Iran to kind of even add to that. But in general, we were kind of anticipating a small drop anyway. And that's just kind of the way that global markets work sometimes. Okay, let's review. Next slide. Let's review what is different between the previous halvings and this one. So the first one is the one that you probably already all know, no? So the US recently, so as recently as January of this year, approved Bitcoin ETFs for trading on the US stock market. And this was like a thing that was 10 years in the making. And I'm not kidding when I say 10 years because it was like 2014 when the Winklevoss twins, so these are, I don't know if you guys know who they are. No, the Winklevoss twins were Mark Zuckerberg's first competitors when he was making Facebook. So matagal na sila in the industry. They were trying to get a Bitcoin ETF on the US stock market from as early as 2014. And it's taken 10 years, and weirdly enough, hindi pa rin sila na-approve. It was many other Bitcoin ETFs that got approved instead. No? So there's 13 different Bitcoin ETFs currently available in the US stock market. And as of a few days ago, when I did this research, there was about $28 billion that had been bought of worth of Bitcoin from those ETFs. And that is not nothing. No, that is the kind of amount that will move markets. And that is exactly what's happened from January to February to March. Bitcoin has been zooming. I don't know if you guys remember, but the Bitcoin price at the opening of this year was $40,000, right? And now we are 65 and change. So it's easily a 50% growth in just a few months. And in fact, we almost did 80% growth when we hit 72. Okay. What else has changed? Well, there's ETFs coming out of Hong Kong now. And the big thing that is interesting about this is that this potentially opens up ETF speculation to the Chinese market. Potentially. Could unlock about another $25 billion. So, of course, these are estimates. We don't know for sure, but that's kind of what the numbers are starting to look like. So, bullish signals, no? Seems like there could be a lot more money. And I don't think the US investors are done yet. I think that there's a lot more capital that could get poured into this stuff. It's just that the thing about ETFs is that these are institutional buyers. No, these are companies. They need board resolutions to buy Bitcoin. So it doesn't happen overnight. Hindi siya parang retail na parang, when you list a token on Binance, literally the same hour, the price is moving like crazy, no? But when it comes to the stock market and when it comes to ETFs, it takes much, much longer than that. It takes months. So we have not seen the end of their buying spree, but so far, this is what it looks like. Okay? Um, I guess I already said this. The all-time high has already been breached. Are we going to see a double or triple peak this year? This one is purely speculation. I don't know if we're going to see two of those 70, 72, 75 peaks coming up. We might even see three of them. I'm not sure. But what's interesting to me is that we're completely out of schedule. No? So none of this stuff is where we expected it to be. And that's primarily because there's so much new money, there's so much new participants in the market that it makes it very, very hard to predict. This stuff is actually what I find super interesting about crypto. Now, no matter how, like I've been doing this for 10 years, and every year something still happens that completely surprises me. I guess it kind of keeps you humble then, no? And it turns out that no matter how much experience you have, you still can't tell sometimes what's going to happen next. And for some people, that might be frightening. To other people, it's exciting. I guess I'm somewhere in between. No? But we have definitely seen this movie before. I do believe that we're still not at the all-time high for this cycle. I guess if unahan ko na yung Q&A because I'm sure someone's going to ask what I think the Bitcoin price is going to be before the end of this year. I think it's going to be $130,000 to $150,000. And I've said that multiple times in other events. The reason for that is because I think that it's starting to slow down, like yung pag-akyat niya. So the first big one was 50x, the next one was 20x, the next one was 3.5x na lang. So I think that maybe this one is going to be a 2x growth. Now, I could be completely wrong, and I'd be super happy if I was off by a factor of 5 or 10 or whatever. I would really love it if the Bitcoin price actually hit $500,000. I just don't. I wouldn't bet on it. No, that's all. That's kind of where I'm at now. Okay, so I promised that I was gonna show you what my forecast for the rest of the year. You can start that. Yeah, so go ahead. All right, so this is what I think it's gonna do. No, yeah, it's gonna be all over the place. I have no idea what it's gonna be, but I think that this is gonna be the most exciting year that we've ever had. If you like weird graphs like this, please follow me on Facebook and Twitter. And please do try G Crypto in your Gcash app. You don't have to install anything, it's already there. Thank you so much for the time, guys. Thank you.
And do we have any questions from the crowd right over here? We have questions. Also, if you're we'll get to you in a bit. If you're online, you can also ask us questions. Just leave them in the comments below so that we can also ask here. Okay, so any questions? I think you raised your hands first.
Hi, Luis. Nice graph. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Time travel loops are awesome.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time on that one.
Awesome. Here's one thing I'd like, since we're talking about predictions of what's going to happen here, here's one thing I'd like to ask you about. There's a lot of chatter right now about a left translated cycle. What do you think of that stuff?
You're gonna have to explain a little bit more detail for everyone on
Okay.
what that means.
Okay, there are some people who are saying that this cycle's peak will be earlier, like much earlier. I'm hearing
Yun na
some.
yun? Like 70 na yun? Yun na yun?
No, not 70, but earlier. I'm hearing some VCs are saying Q1 2025. There's this one analyst, Bob Lucas, he's saying Q4 2024. There's this one guy, Crypto Cred, he's saying Q3 2024. What do you think of talk like that?
So I think the time frame is a little less important to me because I just generally believe that it's going to happen within the next 18 months. I think that's kind of my target for it.
Right.
But I hesitate always when it comes to like the exact time. The reason for that is because there's so much uncertainty, not just in the markets, no, but in the world in general. And parang I mentioned it earlier about the situation in Israel and Iran and all of that stuff. And this is gonna sound horrible, but in general, kasi wars are buy signals, because so it's typically when you announce the war, there's a dip. But in general, over time, as the war is actually happening, markets go up. And the reason for that is because it drives spending. So I'm not saying that there's going to be a war. I'm hoping that there will not be. But I do think that there's so much uncertainty all over the world that it makes it very hard to think in terms of specific time frames. So we have, I will say that the more and more I think about it, the more I think that there will be like triple peaks this year, because we're gonna keep trying each time. But of course, that's just me looking into a crystal ball now. And that's kind of why I ended with that crazy slide there, because like I just wanted to emphasize that no one knows the right answer to this. And everyone who says that they do, they are trying to get your money somehow. So, be careful about that. Sorry, before we go into questions, we're supposed to do okay, sorry. I was
Thanks, Luis.
yeah, thank you. I wasn't supposed to hug the stage. This was supposed to be a two okay.
Ayan. So, more questions incoming later, but first we'll have a fireside chat. So let's keep the insights flowing. Up next, together with Luis, we also have a special guest. We will have a one-on-one fireside chat with our special guest, Dean Hilby, a former Solicitor General, now Dean of the College of Law at Silliman University, and author of a new book on Bitcoin, which is available tonight. So you can actually buy it right here, right now, for 500 pesos. And yeah, they'll explore the critical topics in cryptocurrency. Everyone, please welcome Dean Hilby.
Are we gonna do this Q&A?
Yes,
I'm okay with that actually.
sige na.
Okay.
Yeah, so para we're the middle.
Okay.
Yeah, so firstly, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Thanks for having me.
So before we actually get into, by the way, we're opening for audience questions, and I think the goal here is to try to go through as much of your questions as we possibly can together. Let's try to, if we can, keep it Bitcoin specific. No, we are celebrating the Bitcoin halving kasi, so I know there are some degens in the audience. Anyway, inuunahan ko lang.
Oh, that's fine.
Dean Hilbay, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you got started in Bitcoin because I did the same kasi earlier. So maybe a quick intro to your journey.
Yeah, okay. So my story is very weird because I in 2014 I was with the Office of the Solicitor General, and I'm an economics graduate, and I taught economics when I was in the UP College of Law because I didn't have enough money. And so you would think that I would understand Bitcoin, right? And I've always taught theoretical courses at the UP College of Law. I taught constitutional law and constitutional theory. And so one of my assistants in the Office of the Solicitor General approached me one time and said, Chief, the Solicitor General is called the Chief. Chief, you might want to study this thing called Bitcoin, right? And offered me some books, and I said, I'm not interested. I'm okay with my salary. I'm not interested at all. So that's that. And then 2017, my brother is an engineer. So he got into cryptocurrencies, and every week I'd see him. He'd talk about cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, etc. And I told him, I'm a lawyer and I did securities law for quite some time. I think those are unregistered securities, right?
Yes. Yes.
So
Yep.
and a lot of you will find an echo, right, from my story na sa umpisa you approach the entire space with a very high level of skepticism. Nothing that new can possibly change the world, right? Especially when you start talking to those who've read a lot about Austrian economics, right? And it wasn't until 2020 that I got really interested. 2020, everybody experienced the lockdowns, right? And I felt something was really broken with the world. And I started reading on history of money and the relationship between money printing, wars, and systemic unfairness and human rights really got to me. And after that, I spent one entire month just studying the entire thing. And so when I went to my brother and talked to him, I think I'm interested in this thing. He started laughing and laughing. And I haven't stopped learning ever since. I must have read about 40 books on finance, economics, and history because the problem with Bitcoin, that's why it's so complex and complicated, is that it's not only difficult to understand, you also have to unlearn so much, right? And so our economics today is Keynesian economics, essentially economics that justifies a lot of the money printing, right? Whereas this new entity called Bitcoin is Austrian, meaning don't touch the money at all, which is why Bitcoin is so interesting because it's 21 million and that's it. We're done. So this is the first real sound money in the history of human civilization. And so I was telling some of the G crypto people, right? You guys are so lucky because you're looking at the biggest wealth transfer in the history of humanity. And you're here at this event trying to celebrate, right? The halving. So what's the halving? The halving is a boring event in the sense that this is Bitcoin working as per its code, right? It's a boring event because it will get cut in half by block 80, 810,000, right? But it's also insanely exciting because what that tells you is you have already solved a civilizational problem, which is the problem of money printing. You are the first generation in the history of humanity that will live through that age where inflation has already been solved. You know what's crazy? If after 810,000 blocks, may dumagdag doon sa 3.125 bitcoins. That's Bitcoin done. Tapos yung Bitcoin kung hindi nasunod yung code. But if it's boring, meaning TikTok next block, that means that the revolution continues. And that's very exciting for you guys. I mean, me, I'm in the middle of my life, right? I want to see this revolution finish by 20, 30 years, but most of you guys are in your 20s. makikita niyo ang infrastructure for a new global and political order being built. The entire thing being built. And that's insanely exciting.
I think you've got at least another 10, 12 halvings in you.
Hopefully, hopefully, right?
What would
Yeah.
you say was the books, of the many books that you read, if you were going to recommend one, like which one would you say was parang the one that really, kind of turned your mind around?
I'd say the bullish case for Bitcoin, because it's by Vihai Boyapati, it's short and sweet, right? It doesn't argue. It's not polemical, right? It's not moralistic. It's just this is Bitcoin, right? This is what's exciting about it. These are the risks. And it's very short. I think even Michael Saylor, when he got orange pilled, decided to distribute copies of Viha Boyapati's book. It's a Medium article that was converted into a short book, right? So if you're just getting started, just download the Medium article and that's it. And so especially if you're tech savvy, that's going to appeal to you.
And then for the people in the audience who don't like reading books,
Right.
which content creator, which YouTube influencer, which person would you recommend that they follow or research?
You know, orange peeling or getting orange peeled is a very personal thing. Diba? Someone who's very philosophical might appeal to you, right? Someone who's focused on the price action of Bitcoin might appeal to you. A technologist might appeal to you. So it's really very difficult. And the Bitcoin space is sufficiently diverse. Merong centrists, merong rightists, ultra-rightists, anarchists, merong mga progressive Bitcoiners, right? And so if you search wide enough, you'll be able to find the proper Bitcoiner for your type of temperament, regardless of age, philosophy, or political views. So it's very hard to recommend.
I'll just share a
Yeah.
couple of mine na lang. Very ironically, one of my first Bitcoin writers that I really liked was very ironically, it was Vitalik Buterin who ended up making
Yeah, that's right.
Ethereum. No, kasi so before Vitalik actually built Ethereum, he was the editor of Bitcoin Magazine. You can actually find some of his early writings about this stuff back in 2013. Ganon. So super young. He was 19 at the time or something like that.
Yeah,
Super
it was
young.
his high school at the time.
Yeah, so
right?
this ridiculous high school prodigy
Yeah.
talking about money and what was wrong with money, and then going on to build the second largest cryptocurrency in the world now. So that was kind of his resume. The other guy that I really watched a lot of YouTube of, and I still watch a lot of YouTube of, is Andreas Antonopoulos. He is one of the original content creators for Bitcoin. His last name is a little bit hard to spell. So if you Google Andreas Bitcoin, you'll find it, right? And he still does very regular, kind of YouTube videos. I actually just watched his Lightning Network video from last month, and it was still one of the most crisp explanations of how Lightning works. Which is, for those of you who don't know what that is the Bitcoin layer 2. No, so in the Ethereum world, everything is basically a layer 2. But like in Bitcoin, you really have just the one layer 2, which is called the Lightning Network. Mike, were we going to take? How are we going to do the questions? Oh, okay, great. Sige. So the way that this system is supposed to work is I'm supposed to select the next question, right? And then the person who asks that question, pag nasagot na, they will then select the next person to ask a question. Okay? So anyone who has a question, please raise their hands. Either myself or Dean Hilbay will answer it. Sorry, is it not okay if I keep
It's just
calling you?
Florin.
Oh, sorry. Okay. It's just Luis. Thank you. All right. Questions from the audience. By the way, I was just kidding about the DGen questions. If you wanted to ask questions that are slightly only related to Bitcoin, okay lang din naman yan.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Mag-Google pa ba sila? Hindi naman, no?
That's-
Questions, please. Wag na mahiya. It's okay. I think we just look mean, but we're actually really nice people. Anyone? Okay, go, Mike. Oh, you just went for it. Okay. Sir, please go ahead.
Well, I'm a big fan of freedom, and so I think Bitcoin is a time chain or a blockchain that allows a lot of people to do a lot of experiments. But you have a large segment of the Bitcoin community is really focused on the monetary system or the money aspect of Bitcoin, and for them, that's enough. Uh, my view is the market will decide, right? So I don't care what do you do with the blockchain. Eventually, the market will make a decision on what use case Bitcoin ought to have, right? Although my view is it will be predominantly money because that's the most important thing. If you look at a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that the entire cryptocurrency space is Bitcoin versus the other altcoins. It's really not that because Bitcoin is not even going after that market. That market is too small for Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is going after all real estate, stocks, bonds, artwork, around $900 trillion. Right? The entire cryptocurrency space is about $5 billion, right? Or maybe $50 billion. And so if you're looking at Bitcoin as what's the term? The apex predator. It's looking for something to eat, something to monetize. That will have to be the biggest dinosaurs out there. Right? The all the dinosaurs that you can find. So in the future, and I'm talking about you guys, the young guys, you won't be buying houses for speculative purposes. You'll be buying houses so that you can live in houses. You'll be buying land so you can farm them. Yung concept ng land banking will die. Yung concept ng buying condo for investing purposes, for passive income, that's going to die. Why? Because your generation will say, I have the perfect money. I don't need to gamble on land, real estate, stocks, bonds. I mean, why would you buy stocks when you need to understand what that company is doing? You need to trust the CEO, right? When you can only have the perfect money, right? And that's where Bitcoin is going. It's going after the entire thing. Right?
So I'm gonna just I don't want to I'm not gonna debate on this one. I actually don't like ordinals, but I'm just gonna give context lang of why there is even.
I also don't like ordinals.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
experiment with it, right?
No. It's yeah, I totally understand. So I just wanted to kind of give the audience context on why there is even a debate about ordinals. No, because a lot of people are familiar with how NFTs work on Ethereum or Solana or whatever, right? Those NFTs, kasi when you buy those NFTs, they're not actually on the blockchain. No, so the NFTs are actually stored elsewhere. The only thing that's on the blockchain is the identifier for those NFTs. In Bitcoin, it's different. In Bitcoin, it's actually on the blockchain. They're actually stored on the blockchain. So one of the biggest debates amongst Bitcoiners is that it is quote unquote polluting the blockchain with data that is not related with money. No, it is you're literally so the reason why they call them inscriptions is because you actually write the data of the NFT itself. So the images are actually written into the Bitcoin blockchain. You can only have a few kilobytes, but if you can actually do, there's a little bit of a workaround because it will allow you to inscribe up to 4 megabytes, which basically takes up the entire block. No, um, so it pollutes the Bitcoin blockchain in a way that you could argue is like an attack. Yeah, it's like spamming it. No, so that's the reason why there's a debate about this stuff. Now, I do agree with Florin's assessment that I mean, the free market will do what the free market wants to do. If the technology allows you to write stuff onto a blockchain that should have been just for money, ganun eh. Diba? So that's kind of I guess I'm also a little bit lazy fair about it in the sense like sige, let the market do what it wants. But if you just ask me in general, I don't like it because I feel like it is polluting the blockchain a little bit too much.
I think it boils down to the ultimate solution, whether you allow developers to remove the pollution or you allow the market to remove the pollution, whatever it is that you however it is you look at those ordinals.
Exactly. Okay, so Pano, you pick the. All right. Okay. Man, we're starting strong.
Yung ordinals kasi is weird touch that. Kasi yung crypto, it's in the blockchain, the code is in the blockchain. So ordinals, the data is in the blockchain here. The way to interpret it is outside the blockchain.
Right.
So meron ganun na it's not really on chain.
Okay.
That's fine. Anyway, yung question ko is, I don't view Bitcoin as money. I view it more as gold. Kasi if you transfer money, it takes such a long time. Kasi I do transaction Bitcoin per day. Reading NFTs actually. It takes a long time. So what is your view and what is the potential solution? If to transfer money it takes about 10 to 30 minutes. But the really money.
Okay. Money and property are the same, right? And so if you look at it from that perspective, it dissolves the problem. So if you want a deeper understanding of the problem, it's simply about moving information in the form of value through time and space. So if you want to call that money, you can call it money. If you want to call that property or asset, you can call it property or asset. But the moment we start looking at it from the old model, right? Money is different from property, then you'll have to make that distinction. But Bitcoin is so new that you have to destroy those old models, right? Ultimately, that's why I talk about real estate, because real estate is very important for a lot of people. And that's the biggest money in the world, right? Young people don't look at real estate as money, but money is real estate. Why? Because the fiat system is so broken, yung peso or dollar or yen is so broken. If you have a lot of money, ililipat mo yung pera mo to something that can store value better. And right now, that is real estate. That's why in a world where money is broken, real estate becomes money. Diba? Kasi kung meron kang intergenerational wealth or marami kang excess liquidity, it doesn't make any sense to store it in fiat money because fiat money loses value at the rate of inflation, right? So you're looking for other things in the world that are more scarce than printed money. And that will be real estate, stocks, bonds, artwork. But here comes Bitcoin, simply data that allows you to move value or information in time and space. It doesn't matter. So if I'm going to talk to a wealthy person, I'm going to orange peel that person by talking about Bitcoin as property. It's like 21 million digital slots all over the world and walang reclamation. Hindi pwedeng madagdagan. That appeals to the wealthy people, especially yung mga boomers, right? Ano yung Bitcoin na yan? Hindi ko maintindihan yan. Meron ba ako makukuha na coin or something? No. It's a new form of property. It exists on the internet, parang email, pero 21 slots lang siya. 21 million slots. Mag-uunahan kayong lahat. But if you're going to talk to a social activist or a human rights lawyer or someone who's left-leaning, I'll talk to that person about Bitcoin as a form of money. You say it's slow to transfer? Well, here comes the Lightning Network, right? Moving value at the speed of light. And it's gonna go through several layers. Ngayon pa nga, nasa second layer pa lang tayo. The internet has at least 4 layers. Nandito pa lang tayo sa second layer. So as Bitcoin develops and ossifies, you'll have more and more layers. That will make it easier and easier for people to hold value in time and space. Such that at some point, si Luis na lang yung pwedeng mag-on-chain transaction kasi siya lang yung may maraming Bitcoin dito. Diba? Your children will probably not be able to touch the blockchain anymore. Why? Because in all likelihood, given the money printing, and that money printing is not going to stop, especially with the wars, right? Bitcoin will be more scarce than real estate, stocks, bonds, and artwork, such that kailangan magkaroon ng several layers para mas magaling gumamit ng value na nakalock doon sa blockchain.
So I'll add a little bit about some market action that we've been observing recently. No, so when the Bitcoin ETFs went live in January, one of the first things we observed was that about $3 billion worth of gold ETFs were liquidated, and that money kind of flowed into the Bitcoin ETFs. So it's kind of interesting to kind of see it happening in real time, where people are already starting to reorient themselves. Na parang, okay, maybe this is actually a better alternative to the gold ETFs. One of the biggest problems with gold kasi is that because it's been around for so long, humanity has been using it for about 6,000 years. No, we're not exactly sure how much gold there actually is in the world. We know that there's a certain amount of gold certificates, but supposedly they say na if you try to withdraw all of the gold that those certificates were trying to, no, there's less than half the gold that you could actually get.
Paper gold.
So because we don't know, no, there's no central place where that's being listed. There's no blockchain for gold. One other thing that I just to kind of add to what Florin was saying. So we say that there's 19 million bitcoins right now. There will only be 21 million bitcoins. But very interestingly, there's 4 million bitcoins that are considered lost forever. No, na nawala, na nanakaw. We don't know where they are. The private keys are gone. So actually, it's not 21 million bitcoins in total. It's more like 17. And then there's Satoshi's 1 million bitcoins that theoretically should never move, right? So actually, we're down to, what are we down to? 16 million bitcoins na lang. And just to kind of drive the point home, do you know how many millionaires there are in the world? So I'll answer because I don't think anyone knows that number off the top of their head. There's 59 million millionaires in the world. So that means that even if every millionaire in the world tried to buy one Bitcoin each, there's not even enough for that, right? So they could get zero point 0.3 each, right? So what we are seeing right now is potentially the greatest redistribution of wealth in the world, because it's not the millionaires who have more than zero point 0.3 Bitcoin. It's actually the retail market, no? And that's kind of why it's so interesting to kind of be at this moment in time, because potentially, and I keep having to say potentially, because we're not really sure if this is what's going to happen in the long run. Although, of course, I believe it, and Florin believes it. This really could be a real turning point, no, when it comes to the way that society uses money. And that's why it's such an interesting time to be experiencing all of this. Yeah, sure, there are dumps, but yeah, but the pumps are pretty cool. So there you go. Okay, so you pick the next person to ask a question, I think. There you go, sir.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the sentiment that the approval of ETFs somehow undermines the sense of decentralization?
No, that's fine. Uh, you have 19.6 million bitcoins already in the hands of hodlers. Kahit tanggalin mo yung 10 million dun, right? That's still a lot of money that's in control of very young people who understand what Bitcoin is, or maybe not very young people, but people who are young enough to know that this is going to be a generational thing. Like gold, nobody's gonna buy gold anymore. I've never seen a gold bar, right? I'm probably the oldest person here. You will never want to buy gold because it will look so. It won't make any sense to you. Especially your children. Your children will never want to use gold over Bitcoin or any other store of value that's digital, right? And yung ETFs, I think how much have they bought? 1%, right? Of the total after 3 months. And it's only going to be more and more expensive for them. I think it's a good marketing for Bitcoin because Bitcoin will have to be financialized, right? Meaning, like I said before, you're creating an entire new political and economic system over this thing, a decentralized political and economic order. I can only envision it. That's why I've focused my academic life into teaching Bitcoin. Why? Because the future is so here and at the same time so difficult to foresee. but the optimism is unbelievably high because this is one revolution that's so peaceful that will make your generation very wealthy. I mean, that's the insanest thing about this thing, right? And yung 1% that the ETFs will be able to buy, yeah, maybe 3, even 5, 10%, that's okay. But they can't toy with this asset because it's scarce and digitally verifiable. All they can do is buy, right? And sell. That's it. Unlike with gold, na pwede nilang gawa ng paper gold, that's why they can control the price. But Bitcoin is insanely difficult to control because yung model mo for controlling is for something that you can print. Bitcoin is not something that you can print. And the Wall Street people will understand soon enough that they cannot control this thing.
It's also, there's a mild misconception about how the ETFs actually work. No, so when they say that, oh, BlackRock just bought another $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, it's not actually BlackRock that owns that Bitcoin. So BlackRock works for customers, right? So they have customers. Some of their customers are funds. Some of them are family offices. Some of them are individuals. So actually, yung pera na ginagamit nila are just the deposits of their customers, and all they're doing is managing it for them. So actually, who owns that Bitcoin? It's not BlackRock. It's their customers who own it. So you can kind of say na yeah, sure, it's decentralizing. It's centralizing it somewhat because now there is a manager for these people's bitcoins, but really, BlackRock itself doesn't own it. And for many of those customers, they will only sell if the customer says they want to sell. So hindi naman, 'di ba? It's not like it's not Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, that is now single-handedly deciding what to do with, $10 billion worth of Bitcoin. It's not like that naman. Now, yeah, there is some measure of centralization going on, but I'll counter that by saying that much of the Bitcoin that is currently sloshing around in the stock market right now is actually from a company called Grayscale. Na they were the most centralized holder of Bitcoin because they owned 600,000 Bitcoins from 2013 onwards. And they only started to divest nung nagkaroon ng Bitcoin ETFs. And that was when they started selling it off. And actually, one of the reasons why the market hasn't just gone to the moon, no, is because there is another force that is selling tons of Bitcoin into the marketplace, and that's called Grayscale. So they started the year with 600,000 Bitcoins in their inventory, and now they're down to about 400,000. So they sold 200,000 Bitcoins in the last 4 months, and the price still went up. So that's, I think, the kind of thing that only could happen if there was other Bitcoin ETFs that were really buying this stuff up. But again, it's not just BlackRock making a single-handed decision doing it. It's their own customers telling them that, hey, I want a little bit of exposure to Bitcoin. So that's actually what's going on. Okay, sir. Next question from someone else in the audience.
Yun. Siguro hindi siguro kayo usual na tanong. But rather, ano yung tingin niyo yung impact kung out of nowhere, biglang manok, so makilala yung real identity?
It's going to be juice for about a week or two, and then that's it. Maybe a book will be written about him, right? And then that's it. Yeah, or a movie. Yeah. So even if Satoshi decides to return, right, and says the worst thing that you could possibly hear from Satoshi, that might crash the market for a while. If he decides to sell his million coins, that will be bought. That's it. The important insight is that whoever that person is no longer in control of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is now literally a force of nature, like the wheel or electricity. That's how you look at it.
So actually, in a way, nag-dress rehearsal na tayo for that, no? Because we've had multiple Satoshis over the last few years. So you've had Dorian Nakamoto, and then you've also had Craig Wright. So we've had a couple of people who have claimed that they were Satoshi. And both times, yeah, nag-register naman sa price. There was a bit of a dip. There was some uncertainty. I guess with Craig Wright, there was a lot of uncertainty because they actually created a civil war within Bitcoin. But it was weird because so this was back in 2016 when Craig Wright first showed up, and then by 2017 that was when Bitcoin forked into the you have the normal Bitcoin, and then now you had Bitcoin Cash. So that civil war, we thought, was going to destroy Bitcoin, but even then, no, even when internally the developers were fighting with each other, somehow we're still in a much higher price and in a much better place technology wise, even when the problem was internal na ha. So I guess it seems like we're doing okay. And yeah, I agree that if Satoshi ever, the real Satoshi, and actually the only thing that matters naman kasi when we say the real Satoshi is kung kaya niyang i-unlock yung wallet na yun eh. If he can't do it, it does not matter. And honestly, if he unlocks it, I guess the next thing he has to do is he has to decide whether he's gonna sell it or not. No, because if he just unlocks it and then he says, "Okay, I'm Satoshi, whatever, bye," that's fine. Like everyone is happy and that he's around. Although I have a feeling he'll probably get assassinated. But I don't know. Like honestly, I feel better about Bitcoin because there is no founder. Because every other cryptocurrency has a founder, and that is potentially a point of weakness. The fact that Vitalik is young but and is good because I don't think he's gonna die anytime soon. Hopefully not. No. But like every cryptocurrency that has a founder, that is a point of weakness because you could potentially influence that founder. I don't mean kill him or threaten him or whatever, but influence him to make weird decisions that could compromise the cryptocurrency itself. Mahirap masabi kasi what the actual impact of that person might still have. Vitalik says that, he is not the sole decider for the direction of the Ethereum Foundation, but you gotta imagine that if he says something, nakikinig pa rin yung foundation sa kanya. I mean, is the guy, right? So, ayun. So I think these are points of failure, and the fact that we don't know who Satoshi is a plus because it's one of the few cryptos where the founder is not fully doxed. Now, I guess technically Monero is somewhat like that, but there's not a whole lot of other cryptocurrencies na ganun eh. So, all right. Next question.
Ano lang naman, parang, so, if you're going to be the next president,
It's more for you.
you're going to set a budget to buy
So if you were the next president, I assume this is not for me. So, so
Oh, would I buy Bitcoin if I were president? Buy it for the Republic? Like every peso I can print, right? I'll try to buy with Bitcoin because I'll tell you a story, and I've said this several times with some close friends. I supported a candidate during the last elections, and I was asked whether I would be willing to join the government kung nanalo yung candidate na yun. My answer was absolutely no, but isa lang yung request ko. Give me an opportunity to tell that next president about Bitcoin. Because kahit ano gawin ng presidente na yon, whether that president becomes a good or bad president from a policy standpoint, on the West Philippine Sea, on drugs or anything, kung yung president na yon bibili ng Bitcoin and hodl it long enough for the next generations, that would be already the most important contribution of that president to the history of this nation. I'm so sure about it.
yeah.
Ganon kasimple.
I mean, I couldn't even handle being the president of my own startup, so I don't think I could ever be the president of the Philippines. I will say though that if the Philippines ever ended up investing in Bitcoin, that might be the first time I will ever invest in the Philippine Stock Exchange. So there you go. Hopefully, sir. Next question, please.
The question goes to Dean Hilby, and I admire your decision to study, learn, and become one of the advocates for this space, Bitcoin being in the government. Pero sir, I'll ask you this question: how is it being? I'm sure you're still in touch with your colleagues in the upper echelons of the government. Kamusta sir ang feel?
Okay.
For the people, both good and bad.
I was telling some employees earlier about yung experience ko. I knew immediately kung ano yung ma-expect ko. So I became Dean of the College of Law Silliman of October of 2022. And I told them immediately what I intended to do, which is to begin teaching a course on, I call it a course on money and state, but basically it's an introduction to Bitcoin, right? Um, and I started teaching during the depths of the bear market. So I knew na nung umpisa talagang they were just being nice to me. Na siguro tong si Florin parang nagbi-midlife crisis or something. Or yung iba, I knew yung mukha nila. I think si Florin parang naging scammer na siya. Right? Or yung iba naman is, he's done some good for the Republic, pagbigyan nyo na. Right? Or ganyan lang talagang mag-isip yan. Medyo weird yan si Florin. But, okay, 2024, from $15,000 to $73,000, and there are a few people from Silliman University, faculty, staff, and students who started stacking sats in 2022. We're starting to look like geniuses now, right? Right? So ngayon sila na yung pumupunta. Whereas before, parang you basically have to jump up and down telling people you need to study this thing. Sit down, spend 373 hours to 1,000 hours studying this thing. Dati ayaw nila. Ngayon yung attitude is, ayaw pa rin namin mag-aral pero gusto na naming bumili. Which is which is progress enough, right? So I think that's going to happen over and over again because that was my attitude in 2014. I'm going to dismiss this thing. This is so new. It's so weird. I'm not interested. I think that's what happens to everyone. Kasi it's so paradigmatic, right? It's like Ptolemy and Copernicus. Right? The Copernicans were laughed at. Hindi sila makapasok sa universities. Some of them were prosecuted, right? Until numbers don't lie. We always say in the Bitcoin community, numbers don't lie. You can verify everything. You don't need to trust anyone. Numbers don't lie, right? I think it's gonna happen faster than you think. The Philippine Central Bank, for example, every time I speak in public about Bitcoin and banking, a lot of people expect na I'll go all out against central banks. No. In fact, I'm very thankful to the BSP because they have provided a favorable regulatory environment so that people can buy and hold and experiment. And that's a good thing, right? Kaya I think I wouldn't be surprised if within the next 10, 20 years, you'll have central banks, including the Philippine Central Bank, starting to realize we cannot kill this thing. And because this thing is so scarce, and Wall Street is already here, and the institutions already here, kalimutan nyo na yung mga mayayabang na geeks, right? And the nerds who keep on talking about ending the central bank, kalimutan nyo na sila. You cannot kill this thing, you might as well join it. Right?
Okay, James, pick your next person to ask a question.
What if magkaroon ng global calamity like solar flares, AI taking over, war, if you're thinking of that, but when it comes to Bitcoin,
Well, I mean, we've had a little bit of dress rehearsals on those things as well, no? So, like in terms of global calamities, I think we survived the pandemic. So that was something. Very funnily enough, what happened during the pandemic when it started was that we actually saw a drop in all markets, no? Like all stocks, all commodities, all crypto went down. And that actually really hurt the narrative that Bitcoin was supposed to be a safe haven asset. So when you say safe haven, dun tumatakbo yung mga tao when they feel unsafe. So what happened instead? A lot of people went back to gold, no? Kasi yun yung alam nila eh. And over that period, gold actually rose in price. And it's funny because during the pandemic, I think Pax G. That's a gold token. No, that was like my best investment because unlike everything else, it actually went up. No, um, so I think that humanity is looking for a safe haven. It's just that there's not enough of us that are already familiar that Bitcoin is actually one of the good options. What else have we gone through recently? We've had a couple of wars that were regional. So Ukraine was one of them. And by the way, at any given time, there's at least half a dozen wars around the world happening. It's just kind of localized, and then depends on what the Western media is interested in. Eh. Yun lang yung mga naririnig natin. Eh. But all over the world, there's armed conflict all the time. What was your other example? So AI takeover. Actually, AI takeover is an interesting one. If AI takes over, so you assume that AI is smart, right? It's artificial general intelligence. I think if AI is smart, they'll probably pick Bitcoin. So I think we'll be okay there.
There's a chart that I show to my class in Siliman about the chart of money printing, inflation, and wars. First World War, money printing, inflation, right? Second World War, money printing, inflation. And then Korean War, Vietnam War, and starting after 1971 when the gold standard was broken, yung chart is pag ganun na talaga. Up and to the right, very steep. Forever wars, right? And every time you see that, you see a spike in the price of gold, right? And every time you see money printing, everybody goes to scarce assets, right? And that will have to be very good for Bitcoin. And the only thing that you have right now is a gap between knowledge, right? And yung understanding of what Bitcoin is all about. So kanina, diba, there was a retaliation by Israel from the retaliation by Iran. Right? So Bitcoin went down from 63 to 59. Within 2 hours, it's back at 62. Now it's at 65 because people are starting to realize, right? Bitcoin is so liquid that every time there's a disturbance, right, it's going to receive that shock. But the moment the news dies down or everybody realizes, okay, this is the new the settling normal, then it's gonna go up again. Why? Because yun nga, as more and more people realize what this thing is all about, right? People will go there every time there's a shock. But it's so liquid na pag merong shock, the immediate reaction is to for it to crash. Whether it's the COVID scare or the lockdowns or whatever it was. So I'm not, this is not financial advice, of course, but every time you
We
see
should
a
have
big
started the
thing,
event by saying that, but it's okay. It's too late.
right?
It's too late.
Right? Every time you see news of war, prepare your liquidity, right? Right? Because you know where this thing is going after that news.
Nice.
Hello, my question is, how do we reconcile the benefits of Bitcoin with its carbon footprint? And actually, mas ko isang tanong. What's your thoughts naman on different jurisdictions looking into regulating crypto?
Okay. I'll take the Bitcoin mining question. So the question was, how do we reconcile the fact that there is a really big carbon footprint for Bitcoin? So there's a couple of different ways to think about it. The easy answer kasi is that, I mean, what is the value of securing the world's wealth? It's kind of high, no? So you should be willing to give certain amount of electricity for something as important as that. So that's the easy answer. The harder answer will take a little bit of explaining. I actually met a pretty amazing startup founder because many years ago from Canada. No? So all around the world, there are these oil rigs that are in remote locations, the ocean, the wilderness, whatever. In order to pull oil out of the ground and turn it into fossil fuels, you have to vent methane, which is actually a very bad gas, no, that creates all sorts of bad things. That's basically why we have climate change. So you vent methane into the atmosphere illegally in some countries because that's the only way to produce fossil fuels. Now it turns out that you can actually harvest that methane on site where this thing is happening and turn it into electricity. Turn that electricity into like to power a portable Bitcoin mining rig and basically harvest money from the ground. No? So you take the fossil fuel, the methane, you turn that into electricity, turn that into Bitcoin, you send that up to the internet, now you've got money. So you can literally turn waste into energy, into money, using this system. And I think that as more and more of these facilities realize that this is possible, the cost of the rig is only around $20,000, $30,000. So if you're an oil company, you can probably afford stuff like that. No, so you can do stuff like this now. And there's no other mechanism that would be more efficient than that. Because if you think about it, the only other way to capture that methane is to pipe it and send it somewhere else. It costs a lot of money to build pipelines. So instead, harvest it on site, turn it into Bitcoin, earn money from it. There's not that startup was Canadian, but there's many different ones all around the world that are basically specializing in the various regions kasi that produce this stuff. So I think that yes, there is a carbon footprint, there is an environmental impact, but if we're smart about how we produce the electricity, we can actually turn it into a net positive. It just takes time, because you have to educate everyone na parang, this is what is involved and blah blah blah. But I feel like we're part of the reason why we do events like this, no, is because we're slowly getting there. And there you go. Sorry, what was your second question?
What's your thought about different jurisdictions now looking into regulating?
Okay. So, yeah. Are you a lawyer? Are you with the ESG department of some company? Ah, okay, sayang. I was hoping that you were a lawyer. Uh, here's why. Here's why. Uh, Bitcoin mining doesn't use carbon. It uses electricity. And that's a key insight. It doesn't need to use carbon, right? It uses an energy source, converts it into energy, and that energy becomes money, right? You might want to look into the work of Mr. Daniel Batten. Daniel Batten is an environmentalist who is pro Bitcoin. Why? Because Bitcoin actually rationalizes grids and it's going to become ESG friendly as more people in the ESG space realize what it was. One point is methane, right? Problem of methane is worse than carbon if you're into climate change, right? And Bitcoin mining actually can dampen the problem by converting methane into carbon. The other important point is Bitcoin actually rationalizes the grid. So if you are going to do a lot of renewables, for example, solar and wind, that requires a lot of subsidy, right? And the electricity that they're able to generate is intermittent, right? So during those times when they're able to produce a lot of energy are also the times when energy is not needed by people. So you always have what is known as wasted energy. And there's only one industry that can buy that wasted energy. It's the mining industry. And so the mining industry, the Bitcoin mining industry will actually make renewables more sustainable. Kaya I was asking whether you're from the ESG department of some office. Why? Because from the narrative that Bitcoin is bad for the environment, in the next 3 years, that's going to flip. We need Bitcoin to sustain a healthy environment. And that's going to happen because numbers don't lie, right? And when the studies are done, they will realize that Bitcoin mining is actually not just net positive, but actually positive for the environment. Yung pangalawa is regulation by governments. Every government that tries to regulate Bitcoin will lose. It's as simple as that, right? Every government, because you're depriving your jurisdiction of a store of value that everybody needs. What's the story of the 20th century? The story of the 20th century is that we achieved global payments, right? Very good medium of exchange at the global level, but we destroy the store of value function of money. So ngayon, we live in an inflationary environment. What do people need, right? Not fast payments because we're already in the digital world, but a store of value. So if you're a jurisdiction that tries to deprive your citizens or your companies or your local governments of access to Bitcoin, you're going to lose. That's the geopolitical game theory behind it.
Okay. So I think you can pick one last question, tama ba? Or one or two? Okay, two last questions. Your choice.
Again, good evening po. So I'm still a student, but I want to start out doing crypto. But it's kind of still a scary phase for me, so I cannot, I'm still kind of hesitant. So I just want to ask that if on a personal level, when you go to crypto, what were your motivations for starting out, and what was the um, regular challenges that you were encountering, and your most important.
Okay. I'm trying to remember what it was like to be a student. It's been so long. um, so I'm gonna assume. Oh, I'm gonna assume that you're not super rich. Okay. I wasn't super rich. I continue to not be super rich. When I first discovered Bitcoin, I was definitely not super rich. It was a real challenge for me to even at the yung naabutan ko yung $180 Bitcoin na yun when it dropped to that. So it was like 10,000 pesos per Bitcoin. I still could not afford it at the time. I bought like half, I think. I mean, granted, that half appreciated in value pretty well, no. But I think that the only the advice that we could give to people back then, and the people that we were advocating to were kind of like like young in their early 20s, they didn't really have much money to start with. So the way that we would kind of explain this to them was try to treat it like you know having one less coffee outside per week or per month, and then just put that into crypto or ideally Bitcoin, no, if you're starting. Um, and just make it something small like that. It doesn't have to be. Parang when we were talking about millionaires kanina, we were talking about all of that stuff. It makes you think that this is a big players kind of game. It doesn't have to be. So sorry, will you forgive the one advertisement that I will do for this talk? So in G Crypto, you can spend as little as 200 pesos. Uh, and you don't even have to open an account because it's already on your phone. Gcash is in your app, and you just look for the G Crypto icon. Anyway, sorry, I had to do that. Anyway, so the point is that you can do tiny amounts, just tiny amounts. That's how you start. You just be consistent about it. Now, if you want to graduate to the next level of that, there's the buy the dip strategy. So what I was talking about earlier, we call that cost averaging. You just buy a little bit once a month or whatever time frame you want, no, but ideally like once a month. There's another strategy that's even better than that called buying the dip. Yun naman, the average daily volatility, sorry, this is gonna get a little complicated, huh? On any given day, crypto moves plus or minus 3%. Buying the dip is any day that is twice that much volatility. So, kunwari, if it's -3, you look for a day where the price is -6. -6 or greater, and then you buy then. Now, here's the good part. Every year, on average, there's somewhere between 20 and 24 dip days that are 6% or greater. So you have roughly 24 opportunities to buy. You don't have to buy every single time, but it will allow you to get a better average than just buying once a month. Ganon. Kasi like when you do once a month, sometimes may matatamaan ka ng mahal na day, right? Whereas if you're constantly looking for a good dip day, then you're always going to be slightly below the average, right? So it's slightly more effective, but it also means you have to spend a little bit more time thinking about it. Doesn't really matter which one you choose as long as you're consistent about it. So there you go. And please try G Crypto. Thank you.
Okay. The biggest investment you could possibly have in the next 10 years, maybe even 20 years, is investment in understanding what money is. So I always say spend 373 hours, right, studying what money is. Why? Because we now live in the world where you have essentially the perfect money, right? I don't even have to say what that is. But here's the thing. If you talk to people from the School of Economics, whether it's UP, Ateneo, LaSalle, they won't understand what money is. If you talk to bankers, and I've talked to bankers my age, bankers younger than me, retired bankers, not one of them understand what money is. Right? And so the moment you realize that, it doesn't really matter because everyone starts at the very beginning, which is what is money? So that's the question for the 21st century for everyone. And those who are able to understand what money is, ahead na kayo. The only question is how to implement. Whether you do it through Gcash crypto, right? Or through a lightning transaction, or through an on-chain transaction. It depends on how much you're going to save. But understand what money is and start experimenting, especially with small amounts. And as you learn more, your level of conviction rises and you get to transcend yung highs and lows of the price of Bitcoin because you're looking at a lower time preference, right? So here's how to look at yung price action. If you're a trader, you see the short-term volatility, you're looking at Bitcoin as a token, right? Right? And for traders, volatility is opportunity. That's fine, right? If you don't have time for that, but you understand what Bitcoin is, you'll start to see Bitcoin as property. Parang one slot out of 21 million slots or 2.1 quadrillion slots in digital space. And I'm going to have a million sats, 10 million sats of that because that's something that nobody can manipulate in a world that is very unstable, right? So, yung Bitcoin has a lot of ironies and paradoxes, right? People say it's too volatile. What? One Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. How can that possibly be volatile, right? And the third is the deepest level of understanding of Bitcoin is when you see it as the basic infrastructure for the 21st century and beyond. Para siyang sewage system, para siyang internet, para siyang electrical wiring. That's basically Bitcoin. It will rewire the way human beings organize themselves. And that requires about 2,000 hours of learning. Yun lang.
All right. So you can choose the last question of the night. So this is a very big responsibility. You picked the easy. Okay, there you go.
And other cryptocurrencies can be given for state travel. Can it be transferred from one family member or divided to another family member?
I'm doing it now for clients. Okay. If you go to law school, you'll realize that one of the most difficult subjects in law school is this thing called succession. It's a 3 or 4 unit course where the only thing you study is how to transfer wealth from a living person to that person's heirs when that person dies. That's a very difficult subject in law school. So I've been telling friends in the legal profession that most difficult subject in law school is already dead because I can replace that thing with one transaction with a hardware wallet. Can you imagine? That's how revolutionary Bitcoin is. I can do estate planning, right? That can replace the cost of sending money or creating an account in Switzerland or creating another entity in the British Virgin Islands, which is what lawyers for the very wealthy people do, right? Because they're trying to dampen the impact of taxation, right? Those who understand Bitcoin already understand that you can transcend that entire regulatory mechanism, right, with Bitcoin. Ganon lang.
If you want to do a little bit more research into this topic, there is a startup called Sarcophagus that is a dead man's switch for Bitcoin. And what that means is basically, if you are no longer able to touch the switch, your Bitcoins get transferred to your next of kin. So it's like a programmatic way to do it. I think Florin was talking about a way that there's legal means for it. No, so sometimes you entrust it to a law firm or something like that. This one is more technological, so it's purely software based. But yeah, I think the answer to the question is 100% yes. No, any property that humans value can be transferred to your next of kin upon your death, and Bitcoin is, in theory, is one of the most valuable things now. So yeah, for sure. I think that's all the time we have for today. I know that there were a few other people who had their hands raised. We're gonna stick around for a little bit longer. But we just wanted to kind of release the audience just in case you needed to go home now or use the bathroom or whatever. But we're gonna stick around here. We've got the place for another hour, I think. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening. This was a real pleasure. Thank you so much, Florin.
Thank you. We'll have a picture muna with the crowd before we end the. Okay, and of course.
I'm sumama, Michael.
Ready? 3, 2, 1.
With the audience naman.
Sige, pasok po. Shoutout tayo. Shoutout tayo. BitPinas. Let's pasok po. Lahat po. Lahat po.
And let's get everyone in the crowd shot.
Happy birthday.
1, 2, 3.
Happy New Year.
Shoutout yung BitPinas.
Shoutout ng BitPinas.
Ano, okay na?
Okay lang.
Oh, welcome to BitPinas. Ano sa
Ba't biglang
Sabi tayo sila. 1, 2, 3, action.
BitPinas!
One more. Ang saan nyo, masama sa inyo.
BitPinas! Ayan, thank you so much, everyone. And again, please remember to tweet us with hashtag CryptoPH and tag at BitPinas. Scan the QR code right here in the screen to receive a POAP from Mintu. And if you're online, share the live stream on Facebook. Your post must be public so that any one of you can win 25,000 Satoshis. We would like to thank our partners, BitPinas, Luis Buenaventura, who brought us this event, and co-organized by Bitshares Labs. And also huge thank you to G Crypto for the venue. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the week. Mingle muna tayo. And again, the book by Sir Dean Hilban is also available here for 500 pesos. You can get a copy here at the side and pwede nyong ipasign. And yeah, that's it for us, everyone. Pwede raw GCash as payment para sa libro ni Dean Hilbay. And yeah, that's it for us. Thank you so much for coming to Crypto PH Conversations. Over and out.